A little jewel among the many urban treasures in the city of Edina is the Edina Art Center. Located in a leafy city park and natural wetland area, the Art Center offers a variety of classes and events unrivaled in the Twin Cities metropolitan area. From its origin in a small country house, the Art Center has grown to include 3 painting studios, 3 pottery areas, 2 additional classrooms, and a completely equipped media services center.
My name is Colin Nelson, and I'm a writer myself. My most recent book is called Fallout. It is a suspense book, or novel that takes place here in Minnesota. Terrorists are attempting to blow up a nuclear power plant in Monticello. Welcome to the Author Studio here at the Edina Art Center. I'd also welcome you to take a look at the building. It's a fascinating facility, and encourage you to look at participating in some of the classes, using the gift shop, or becoming a member of the Edina Art Center. You do not need to be an Edina resident. We would welcome your membership or your attendance at any of these programs. We also are expanding our writing classes. We've partnered with the Loft from Minneapolis and are offering our first writing class ever in the history of this place this spring, and hope to offer even more in the fall. My name is Colin Nelson. Not only am I the host, but I've also written a suspense novel. This is actually my second one. This is about a prosecutor in Minneapolis who's trying to convict a murderer, and she gets caught up in a terrorist plot. Very exciting.
It is.
My book and Bonnie's, which we're going to talk about in a second here, are available for sale in the gift shop. Let's see, I mentioned about memberships in the Edina Art Center. One other thing. If you are new to the program here and would like to keep in touch with us, or thank you. If you would list your name and your email, we won't bother you or bug you, but we will keep in touch about programs that are coming up. We meet here the second Saturday of every month. We take the summer off. In May, Dr. Joel Carter will be here, who is a doctor who works in pain and healing, but he also is a sculptor. In fact, one of his pieces won 3rd place in the Edina Public Art Contest and is on display over by Southdale. But he's going to talk about how sculpting and healing go together. I think you'll find that unique and very interesting. That's in May, the second Saturday in May. Today, however, I want to introduce Bonnie Blodgett. Bonnie has done writing all over the world in every genre you can imagine, which we're going to talk about. And particularly, we're going to talk about gardens and designing gardens today. She, too, is amongst many books she's written. She lost her sense of smell for a period of time. We're going to talk about that. And her book, Remembering Smell, which I have read, is fascinating. This, too, will be available for sale in the books in the gift shop. So we welcome you, Bonnie.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here. Thank you all for coming.
One of the most encouraging things about meeting and getting to know Bonnie is she had a gardening letter, and she called it the Blundering Gardener. Is that correct?
Almost.
That makes the rest of us feel
I called it
hopeful.
the garden letter, but I wanted to call it the Blundering Gardener, and I do call myself that because I do blunder often, always, and that's how I learn everything that I know how to do, is sort of through trial and error. And my gardening column in the St. Paul paper, which appears every Sunday, is called The Blundering Gardener. So.
That gives us the rest. Gives the rest of us hope, I think.
Yes, exactly.
If you can
I can do it, so can anyone.
Well, before we talk about gardening, I'm so impressed with all the things that you've written. Can you tell us about your background? How did you get started in writing?
Oh, good question.
What have you written?
I started writing, I started talking, actually, very early on, and routinely every night shared a bedroom with my sister and would talk her to sleep, and then just keep on talking. And then when she finally kicked me out of the bedroom, I brought in about a sort of a coterie of stuffed animals with whom I chatted through the night until my parents would, run upstairs, and their bedroom was right below mine, and just, for God's sake, please, you keep. So I've always been a verbal, and I've always loved storytelling, and I've always wanted, to do something creative. I wanted to as a child. I always thought I would be an artist of some kind because I like making things, and decided to become a singer-songwriter. That seemed to pull a lot of those things I like to do together. But the problem was that if I tried to sing in front of more than 3 people, my voice disappeared. A terrible stage fright. So I gave that up. And then my husband decided to become a journalist. We were all just sort of fishing around for an identity, and I think I'll try that. That looks cool. It was a cool thing to be back then. And so he went to journalism school, and then he discovered that he had terrible writer's block. So I never had a problem with that. So I would just write all of his papers, and then we thought we'd be a great reporting team. He would report, and I would do the writing, and so we did that. And my byline was starting to show up in these little, alternative weeklies and stuff. And then all of a sudden, I started to get real work, and then I became a magazine editor, and then from that point on, my destiny was determined because I was able to make a living in publishing. So that's what I've been doing ever since.
You wrote for, this no longer exists, unfortunately, in the world, but at one time you wrote for an airline magazine that actually had good quality fiction and nonfiction, right?
Yeah, there
Tell
was
us about
this
that.
golden moment when I was the editor of TWA Ambassador, and TWA was a very glamorous airline, and the idea was to entertain passengers who were on the plane for many, 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 many hours. And we were given an enormous budget, and so I worked with Bill Bryson, Jane Smiley, I mean, just on and on. Anybody I wanted to just pick up the phone, Roy Blunt, Garrison Keillor, I'd say, hi, I'm, and I got money. And that was the high point of my career. I sort of peaked, young. I was back in the 80s, but then the airline crashed, or Carl Icahn took over and then canceled all of the contracts, and that was the end of that. But so I've had, a lot of jobs and a lot of fun. But became I actually was the editor of Minneapolis St. Paul magazine for a while. But I decided to start my own magazine in right around 1990, I guess it was. And because I'm a very hands-on person, and I love design, so I learned how, with desktop publishing, a person could make their own magazine, in their bathroom, and it's practically what. And so the Garden Letter was born, and I did that for 17 years, and it became my education because I didn't know anything about gardening when I started it.
Now, you've read, Bonnie often writes in the op-ed section of the Star Tribune. What's the difference between being a writer or journalist and editing? Can you tell us a little bit about the which you like more, or what the difference is?
I always wanted to write, but I was afraid, and I found that editing was it was just a wonderful way. I always had a lot of ideas, so the great thing about being an editor, a magazine editor, is that you can have like 10 of them, and I just would throw them at people like frisbees, say, this would be great, and tell them exactly what I wanted, and come back, check back in 6 weeks, we'll see how you're doing. The hard thing about writing is that you have to stick with one thing, and that's hard. That's been hard. But I always wanted to write, and I finally, I think that's what the Garden Letter was for. It was for me to sort of find my voice as a writer, because I was awfully good at channeling other writers. I was a very good editor because I could become, that other voice. But who am I? After a while, I wanted to kind of figure that out. So So that was really what that was about. And I'm
One
sorry.
of your earlier books was a nonfiction, wasn't it?
Well, I wrote a history of the presidents, and it began as a history of their homes, and it became much more than that, because as it turns out, I think our sense of place really has so much to do with who we become, our upbringing, our surroundings, and there's a sort of a lot of landscape in that book too. But that was the first book that I wrote.
There's some beautiful photos in that.
Yeah,
I've seen it.
Yeah, and that was another one that we packaged ourselves and then sent to a publisher, sold to a publisher. I love putting things together, and I love that about the new technologies, because you can do all of these things online. It's wonderful. It's lots of tools for creative people now. And it's fun to play with them.
So then you got interested. What interested you in? Why did you start gardening? The gardening letter.
Yeah, I started gardening because I had a new house and a couple of brand new kids, and they needed a place to play. And my backyard at that time was a shady, muddy mess, and I couldn't grow grass. I couldn't. It was just this inhospitable terrain for children. And a neighbor brought over some hostas and said, "These will grow." And I didn't believe him, but I planted them anyway, just to be polite. And they died. I mean, they looked dead. And then the next morning, I watered them. The next morning, I came downstairs and saw these plants that were absolutely beautiful, healthy. You know how hostas are, you can't kill them. And it was like a miracle. I thought, wow, this is really cool. What else can we grow in the shade? And then it turns out, oh my gosh, so many things. So my first garden evolved out of that. And by the end of that summer, literally, I was completely obsessed and had a really pretty garden, I must say.
Tends to happen to gardeners.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, but for me it was just such a sudden, I mean, I had tried to grow a vegetable garden when I was about 16, and it was the year of that, I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a year when there was such a terrible drought, it was like the Sahara, and and I didn't know anything again about how to keep plants alive at that point, so all I had were just sort of these shriveled carrots, and I mean, it was all very depressing, and I just thought, I'm never doing this again. This is ridiculous. This is so hard. But so then, finding out that when you're not gardening in a drought, and when you do have decent soil, and you do have a friend who gives you the right plant, wow, the payback was pretty awesome.
So that led to the newsletter.
And so I knew I was wanting to write and not be an editor, but to be a writer. I knew that I loved making things, putting together publications. I loved the design part. I designed a very attractive, I should have brought one, but package for, I did all the drawing. There were a lot of little sort of cartoons, and it was fun. It was like, I referred to it as my winter garden, because it gave me something to do in the winter that was like gardening.
Idea. Yeah.
And so, but the whole idea was to let people know that, this is not, Gertrude Jekyll here, maybe someday. But I was learning, and then I would tell people about my latest project, and just try to make it fun.
Mm-hmm. So you started that in did you say the late 90s?
Yeah, I actually started that, boy, I can't remember anything. I started that in 1995.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I just put her down about a year and a half ago.
Wow.
So it was a long run. Mm-hmm.
Who did you publish that for?
Me.
Okay.
You mean who was my...
Yeah, who was your target?
Oh, the target?
Yeah.
Oh, well, me and me. No, pretty much.
It's a good start.
It's like my sister, growing up, whoever wanted to,
She had one newsletter a month.
Yeah, no, I had a couple thousand subscribers, actually, and all over the country. It kind of was word of mouth. I didn't promote it or anything, but But I did sell some ads. So the tended to be the smaller garden centers that didn't have enough money to advertise in the Northern Gardener or some hotshot magazine. So I had my little band of supportive readers and
What subjects did you cover?
Well, everything. I mean, I had departments that were named for, the plant, my favorite plant kind of a thing, and then what I'm thinking about design was another department, and it was just pretty much of a full serve, multi, yeah.
Well,
whatever you can think about. Vegetables, tried to get those in. But I'm mostly an ornamental gardener.
Did you find that your training as a journalist, where oftentimes you are required to cover a subject or a story that you know nothing about, you learn quickly something about the subject? Did you
Yeah,
find
that's the great thing about journalism, actually. That's
was that helpful
my favorite
for your
thing about
gardening
it.
letter?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing about being in this kind of a business is that when you are interested in knowing something, you can just call up whoever you want to and say, pretend if you have to. I have an assignment with the New York Times, and can you just give me a few minutes? I mean, when my kids were little, I did freelance for a number of national magazines, and one of them was parenting. And like a lot of parents, I was pretty flummoxed, and so I would call parenting and say, "Can I write about 2-year-olds? Because wow, I don't know, I'm not sure if this is normal." And they say, "Okay," and then I'd call the whoever it was at Harvard who knew all about 2-year-olds and find out. So. And I've done that with. I love the fact that being a reporter, being a journalist, you have this wonderful excuse to ask a lot of questions, and then go from one topic to the next. Being sort of ADHD, that helps too, I think.
So by the mid-2000s, did you know quite a bit about gardening? Had you learned a lot?
Well, I gardened. I mean, I would be out there in the summer, 12 hours a day. I mean, I just love gardening. I still do. So, so as I said, I would always buy, I broke every rule. I think my favorite rule that I tell people to just go ahead and break this one is the never plant fewer than 3 of one plant, and preferably mass plants, because you don't want your garden to be a cluttered mess. Well, my garden, you'll see, I've brought some pictures, it is kind of a cluttered mess. So my whole design thing has been how to accommodate this insatiable appetite that I have for plants. I mean, I can't imagine not being able to go to specifically the Friends School. Have you ever heard of that? Have you ever been to they have this unbelievable sale right in the middle of Mother's Day every year. And people come and they bring their wagons and their bushel baskets, and it's just a funky thing. It's over at the University of Minnesota Grandstand. And actually I drive they have these giant trucks, and they go around the state picking up plants, and then I'm the truck driver, which is fun. But what it does is it gets you into the sale early. And it's a madhouse. But what they have there is everything. I mean, if you go online and look at their catalog, they have, and the woman who selects the plants is, of course, now become a very good friend, and she's just a genius. She has a photographic memory for plants. She took up planting gardening even after I did. She's a very quick study, became obsessed, as one does. And she now makes a point with the sale to have plants that nobody else has, and it's just immense, and it's so fun. And I always go and spend more money than anyone else, literally. I've got the award. I get the award, and so then I have all these plants, right? And then the trick is that it's pretty early in the season, and my garage is just. Can't get the cars in I'm just crammed with, and so then you have to keep them alive because you can't plant them yet. And if it's going to be like this year, we're going to have winter in May. I mean, I'm already trying to figure this out. But so it's I'm always, my design thing is to tell people you can have it all, you can do this, you can be impulsive, because why would you not want to be? And so it's up to the design sort of principles to keep all of these plants looking like it was good, looking good. So I have many thoughts on that topic.
In 2005, however, your world crashed, didn't it?
Pretty much.
What happened?
Yeah. So I lost my sense of smell. I
Your what?
stupidly.
You lost your sense of smell?
Yes.
I've never heard it.
Yes.
You are unique.
Yes. Well, no. Well, maybe.
I've not heard of that. Tell us about it.
Yes. Have any of you had any problems with your noses? Yes. Okay. Well, anything I say, all I can say is I'm sorry, because it's not fun, is it? No. So in 2005, I stupidly took this cold remedy called Zicam, which has since been recalled. There are Zicam products still sold, but not this one. The one that was recalled, it had a combination of a bad chemical compound in it and then a bad package that enabled you to get way too much of this, it's a zinc compound, up your nose and into your brain, actually, which is where smell happens. Mm-hmm. Smell doesn't happen here. It happens in your brain. And so I sniffed this stuff up my nose and was one of the several thousand unfortunate people who then, as a result of that, lost my sense of smell, because the chemical has the ability to literally burn all the cells in what's called the receptor sheet, which is a postage stamp size sheet of cells, tissue, behind your nose, right between your eyes, where the odor molecules, smell is a chemical sense, unlike vision, which is vibrations. Smell is there are these invisible to us molecules that come up from whatever it is that we're, cup of coffee goes up your nose. The molecules go up into your nose through this little passageway they hit this receptor sheet. The receptor sheet is this incredibly complex combination of cells that recognize and organize and make a lot of decisions about whether you like the smell, whether you, what the smell is, if there are any memories attached to it, what kind of an emotional response you might have because of those memories. Smell is a fascinating and incredibly complex sense, more than any of our other senses. And I refer to it as the primal sense because it's the oldest and in many ways the most important. We smell just as other animals, just as other species of all kinds do. Smelling is the thing that we engage in order to do all sorts of extremely fundamentally important things, such as eat, find a partner. There's a lot of sexuality involved in smell. Mark territory. I mean, other animals do this in a more obvious way than we do, but we do these things also. And so when the sense of smell is suddenly disconnected, it's very, very traumatic. Now, if it's disconnected more gradually, less so. But in my case, it happened just like that. And my brain responded by assaulting me with horrible, vile smells that were not real.
Wow.
These are called phantom smells or phantasmia. This is Oliver Sacks' territory, right? In fact, he quoted me in his new book because he needed to talk about this, and I had just written a book about it. But you know what phantom limb pain is. Mm-hmm. So nothing about smell is thoroughly understood. It's sort of in the frontier of brain science. But the theory is that when you suddenly lose your sense of smell, your brain is freaked out about it and is trying to protect you. And so this is my theory, by the way. Don't ask a real scientist about this. But I mean, doesn't it make sense that, okay, you're smelling the thing, feces, for example, dead meat, dead animals? That was the big smell. Dead animals.
Was that
over and over and over and over.
Is that all the time? Or
All the
you
time.
You get break? You get a
All
break
the
from
time, no break, because that didn't work either. There are things about smell, such as the fact that you adapt to smells. If you are smelling something for perfume, put on perfume, smells great for a while, and then you can't smell it anymore. Other people can, but you can't. And that's because your brain adapts, and it takes about 20 minutes. Things like appetite. The smell is very much involved in triggering hormones that enable you to feel hunger, and then to feel about a half an hour later after you've eaten, satisfied, satiety. Those are two different hormones. Smell is involved in triggering those, which is why when you lose your sense of smell, you lose those triggers, you lose those sensations, and people who are anosmic, that's the word for not being able to smell, initially lose a lot of weight because they're so traumatized, and food is disgusting. But then they start eating kind of compulsively and put on a lot of weight. They've lost the satiety hormone, it isn't working anymore. That feeling of satisfaction that we're hardwired to want to have, we don't have it, so we keep trying to get it. This happens with animals too. It's very, very odd. It happened to me. So the whole thing was pretty interesting. Very.
You told me once that you even familiar things that give us all comfort and a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Like tell everyone about the chair in your living room.
Yeah. Well, when people ask me what it's like to not be able to smell, the first thing I say is it's not like having a cold. That's what the assumption is, that your nose is plugged up. I know what that's like. Well, it's not actually just like that. It's sort of like that, but you can still smell if you have a cold, because smells, these odor molecules, they can go up through the retronasal passage. That's this channel behind your mouth, so that when you eat, it doesn't seem like you're tasting. The food tastes off and weird, but smells are going up into your brain. You're not completely disconnected. When you have no sense of smell at all, and you lose the connection to reality that is what I describe as kind of the smell soundtrack of your life. There are so many things that we smell that we don't know we're smelling. We're not thinking about the fact that they're there. And one of the I wrote in my book to try to get this across to people, how it felt sitting in the living room of my house, which was built by my great-grandfather. It's been in our family since 1880. It's just full of smells that I never thought about before. But my home is very much, for me, my refuge. Just as part of my garden, my house, my living room, all this old furniture that is older than me, the rich fabrics that have absorbed the smells of the people and the fire in the fireplace, and my dog. I'm very much a dog person, and there are these sensations that make, when I go into my house and into my living room and sit down in this big old wing chair, and I get my dog in my lap, and I'm feeling soothed and comforted by, guess what? Smell. But
Sure.
Did I know that before? So now I'm sitting in my living room, and I'm feeling like I'm not there. And I don't know why. Why do I feel like I'm not really here? That was the disturbing thing, more than disturbing, very upsetting thing for me about this experience was, and I think it was partly because I lost my sense of smell so suddenly. Again, anything that's gradual, you get used to, and your brains are, you've heard the word plastic. They compensate, the brain compensates, but it takes a while. And so then there's this thing that kicks in called trauma. So it's hard to know sometimes when you're emotionally upset how much is just plain old trauma, and the fear of the fear. But in any case, I felt very, very very detached and cut off and scared. So that's what my book is about.
I'd like to keep talking about this, but I'd also like to get on to the pictures that you brought. Bonnie writes very movingly about this experience. You recovered in about a year, thankfully. Yep. And this is also for those of you that are interested in the scientific, physiological background, some of which you've mentioned already. She goes into great and I believe accurate detail about that. So if you're interested, pick up one of her books. You have said that designing gardens is similar to being a painter, except that you have the problem that the material is always moving. Right?
Oh, it's not a problem, though. It's a challenge.
So tell us how you got into garden design.
I actually love the fact that gardens are always moving, because I love the idea of working with these materials that are, in fact, alive. And one of the fun things about the garden is I mean, you never feel lonely. You go out there and you're just there's all this activity. There are all these bees and butterflies and hummingbirds and plants engaged in communicating with them. And the more you learn about how that all works, the more fun it gets, because you actually understand. It's kind of like when I wrote my smell book, one of the things that I understood for the first time was my dog's behavior when I take him out on a walk. What is marking? Marking is something completely different from what I used to think it was. And it's he's actually communicating with the other dogs in the neighborhood. It's kind of like they're sending smoke signals to each other. And the main message is, get out of here.
Yeah.
You know, don't think I'm not watching, that you came by, you know, and just to let, but, you know, so anyway, so that was one of the things about gardening that was wonderfully exciting to me, was to learn that the plants aren't alone out there. They've got this whole world of buddies and pals and co-conspirators, and you know, it was very. It sort of has formed my worldview in many ways. I have to say, you know, because now we're all talking about sustainability and ecosystems and balance and nature, and I get it in a way that I didn't before.
Tell us about the slideshow. What are you going to show us?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to do this very quickly because we're running out of time, and I would love to take questions. But I just wanted to show you some pictures of...
Here it is.
Oh, there it is.
Yep.
First of all,
Bonnie,
this is...
It's this button forwards it.
Thank you. Okay. This is a plant, one of those plants. This is not a plant that I grow. It's a tropical plant called the corpse flower. And it has a fancy long, you know, Amorphophallus titanium or something like that. But anyway, the point is that this is an example of a plant that probably more than any other, it just does it. Well, first of all, it stinks to high heaven. But why? Why does it put out the smell that's exactly the same smell that I was smelling when I had phantasmia, the smell of dead animals? Because it needs to attract pollinators that eat carrion. So carrion flies, blowflies, all those sorts of. So and the reason why it needs to attract those flies is because it needs them to pollinate. It needs them to spread its pollen so that it can reproduce. And also, some of these plants. Actually, this is a pitcher plant. Wow. They also eat some of these insects. And so they have to time their activity, their trapping mechanism, so that some of the insects are allowed to escape because they have to go and pollinate the next flower. They have to allow the plant to reproduce. Some of them don't get to escape. So these plants attract these insects by not only through the smells that they produce, but also they have these devilishly effective ways of opening themselves up and having these bright colors, which can also be a lure, and then snapping shut. Fiendish. These are the carrion plants that actually look like dead meat.
Yes.
And there you can see the little the flies in entrapped inside them. Now, this is the kind of plant that I prefer to grow. This is a plant. This is the lilac. We're all waiting, hopefully, not in vain. These are some of the most fragrant lilacs ever bred. Many of the older plants are more fragrant than the new ones. Almost all of these are either very, very old hybrids or species. The one in the upper, that-a-way, in the corner, the blue one, is one of my favorites. It's a French hybrid called Henri Louis or Robert or something like that. But then right next to it is our plain old Syrica vulgaris, the plain old ordinary lavender one that we can grow here. And it's not the most spectacular looking, but it has the best fragrance. These are peonies. These, I'm not going to tell you what they all are, but these, there are, if you go online, if you want your peonies to smell, not all of them do. The smell has been bred out of a lot of these plants. You can find out which ones have the best fragrance. The one in the middle, the big white one, is called crinkled white, and it just happens to be one of my favorite peonies. I like the single peonies.
It's beautiful.
That's the Festiva maxima, you've probably heard of, and left. Beautiful fragrance, beautiful peony. This one, Myrtle Gentry, interesting name, is the most fragrant peony of all, the pink one. Casablanca lilies. You can see how the flower is shaped to attract the pollinator. And of course the fragrance is a very big part of it. Lilies almost have a cloying fragrance, very, very strong. This is my house, and the whole, you can see how many plants I grow. This is only just about a fourth of it. Everything, there's hardly any grass. And most of the plants that I grow nowadays, I do take fragrance into account. I want to mention the white sort of blotch right in the middle on the wall is one of the best plants for fragrance and for everything else. And one of the plants that we should grow more, it's called Clematis recta. I highly recommend you go out and find it if you love clematis. This is a shrub, not a vine, but you can train it to be a vine if you want. But it blooms all summer long. It smells like jasmine. It's indestructible. It self-seeds. I love self-seeders. Either you do or you don't. I could not imagine life without them because I like gardens to change all the time and to surprise me. I don't want to be in control of my garden. I want it to be in control of me. And then to show me something I didn't see before, like, wow, look at these two colors go together so well. Why don't you just let me stay here? And I usually do. But I mean, I have yarrows, salvias, the herby scents I love. That's a honeysuckle growing on the trellis. That's very fragrant.
Wow.
The European honeysuckles are the most fragrant, by the way. That's my dog, and the salvia in the foreground and some yarrow. I grow lots of conifers. That's one of my tricks for keeping things looking orderly, is to plant lots of conifers because they always look great. They smell nice also, and then I'll repeat. I like to repeat things. So I repeat, for example, blue globe spruce, which is a very neat and tidy, round, beautiful color, boom, boom, boom in a row, and then you can plant anything else you want around it and it looks good. This is apricot beauty tulip. It's the most fragrant tulip there is, and it's quite beautiful also. The species tulips on the other side, the yellow and the species tulips, again, the species tend to have the fragrance. They're low, short, they naturalize, they come back, they're just the greatest. Isn't that pretty? That's a short parrot tulip species that I grow on my boulevard. The plant here in the front with the yellow flowers right in the corner is a milkweed. Everyone should be growing milkweed. Our butterflies are in trouble. And milkweed is just a beautiful plant. This one's called Silky Gold. It has beautiful deep yellow gold flowers.
Bonnie, may I interrupt you? Now, how do you pick which?
Yeah, well,
You're going to get to that?
what I do, how do I pick which? I don't.
Okay.
Really. I'm the kind of gardener who I sort of guess where a plant might look nice. But mostly I'm thinking about what its needs are. Like, these are all sun-loving plants because the front of my garden gets full sun. These are all plants that can tolerate some dryness. They don't need a ton of fertility because I don't have that. I have great drainage. So kind of the Mediterranean, the chalky, you know, those kinds of plants like the gravelly soil. So I kind of know those things. I have lots of California poppies. They are an annual, but they self-seed. They'll come back year after year, and they pop up all over the place. And they have wonderful gold flowers. What I do to keep things from looking bad, right, I hope, is I just use lots of structure, such as stone. I'm a huge stone freak.
Yeah,
I spend every other weekend in a quarry somewhere. And I have my places that I go.
Which you won't tell us.
So this particular wall is made out of cobblestone granites, granite cobblestones that came from underneath the streets in St. Paul. We have lots of old things in St. Paul, including streets that have, so we're always digging them up and pulling up the bricks and putting them in our gardens. And then just, you know, I mean, this cotoneaster behind the lamb's ears is the name of the plant in the foreground with the silvery leaves and then the cotoneaster right behind it. I'm not going to pretend that I planned to put those together. I didn't, but the lamb's ears actually self-seeded. That I have lamb's ears, all of it. I love it. But this particular one put itself there. Just decided, I think this would be a good place. And then when it looked so pretty with the cotoneaster, which is the red-berried shrub behind it, I thought, well, okay, good for you. I like that. I'm going to let that stay. So I got to move quickly here. But one of my favorite plants is yarrow, because yarrow has this wonderful horizontal way of blooming. I don't know how else to put it. Its flowers are flat. How's that say? And well, this is called apple blossom. It's a really pretty yarrow. And it too has a lovely smell. Another great kind of smell is the smell of like sumac, and this fall spirea is the sumac-looking plant there with the chartreuse leaves. Great smell and great shape. So I like to have big, heavy, strong plants, and then they kind of provide like anchor and order, and then the little ones underneath. Another great plant is Egyptian ornamental onion, which is in the foreground, and it's just fun. And this is what it looks like all summer long. It grows, and it smells great too. It has that oniony aroma, but it produces its onions at the end of stems, like Tinker Toys. Then another stem, another onion, and then it just weaves through the garden. This is Giganteum allium. Just before it's going to open, there it is, just after. The red crimson barberry, I love that little shrub. It's pretty ordinary, but it has such great color, and I plant that all around to repeat the color and that tidy little form. Again, conifers, love them. One of my favorites, that's a blue globe spruce with a juniper called Daub's Frosted. I would say my favorite of all conifers. It has this great horizontal, feathery presence. It's just beautiful, delicate. Seafoam rose. I love roses, and guess why? They're fragrance. Yeah. So seafoam is one of my favorites. That's a penstemon in front of it. This is that sem I was telling you about. It's called fall spirea or sorbaria. I like to show people plants I think should be grown more. You don't see that all the time. It has huge white flowers, come up on stalks. It's a native. It's just a great plant. Chamaecyparis is another wonderful shrub over here on the right. And tiger eyes sumac, you've heard of that, I'm sure. It's a new plant from Bailey Nurseries that is just fabulous. If you love sumac, but you think, oh, it's just so big and strong and invasive, I can't put it in my garden, try this one. This is the way it looks in the spring. very soon, I hope, we'll see this. It has this soft, sort of furry bark. It's just a great, and then it turns into this.
Wow.
So, you know, love that kind of Japanese look. The dogwoods, some of them do the same thing. So tiger-eyed sumac, put that on your list. Tridescantia, this is a great native. We should be planting, of course, as many natives as possible for our wild friends, the bees and the butterflies, and they love this one. I love it too. I love blue. Baptisia, another native that the wildlife are attracted to, beautiful plant. This is the new yellow one. So you can see how the stonework kind of tames things down. Sedums, fantastic, love them. I have them spilling all over everywhere. In the front here is Russian sage. In the late summer, Russian sage comes on. It has a pungent odor, just fills the whole, it's just, that is it. That's the fragrance statement in late summer is Russian sage. And there it is again with some ornamental oregano. Asters, the best plant probably, if you had to pick one, for bees and for butterflies. It's a native, and it's important at the time of year when the asters bloom, which is in late summer. This is when the migration is beginning, and so that's why the asters are so important as a food source. This is a little, here's another way that I kind of tame with the brick. This is the brick from the streets. I have this patio that's very formal, and it's it's all planted around with thyme, so it smells nice. You can see some of the thyme on the right there, and some sedum. Some chives, love chives. I let them grow all over the place. Great smell again. That's the purple plant. This is a PG hydrangea with it. This is my backyard. Same thing, more chaos, and lots of vines. And I grow wisteria over the top. Wisteria has a terrific smell. This is it's called Aunt D is the cultivar that's hardy here. Very sweet, fragrant, light. Here it is in bloom. It's my garage. Every place I can grow something, a lot of it's up.
I'd like to see the inside of your house. Do you have any of those photos?
Yeah, pretty much the same. The garage, I'm growing hops because I've decided that I'm going to learn how to not only make beer, but make my own beer from scratch, which is a lofty ambition. I will be the first person in Minnesota to succeed, but many people are trying. Also, I just think hops vine is gorgeous. It has these chartreuse leaves that smell, of course, wonderfully, just like beer, kind of.
Should we take some questions, Bonnie?
Yeah. We're running out of time.
Yeah. Well, normally we go an hour. You're welcome to stay longer.
Whoops.
But let me take a quick break. It's beautiful to see the colors, by the way. Thank you. Any questions?
Yes.
You're fed.
I'm wondering, so you lost your sense of smell suddenly.
Yeah.
Did you acquire it again suddenly, or did it?
I'm really glad you asked that.
Would you repeat the question?
Yes, I did. I know. The question was, you lost your sense of smell suddenly. Was its return equally sudden? No. Probably from the moment that the injury occurred, the cells were beginning to heal themselves. Now, the interesting thing about smell, and this is what shows you how important this sense is, the only neurons in the brain that have the ability to heal, to repair themselves, are olfactory cells.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So what happens is they divide. This takes time. And so in my case, it took, 9 months or something. I don't really know exactly when I was able to smell. I started noticing things, but then kept telling myself I was making it up because I have a big imagination. But then when I smelled catmint, I mentioned Russian sage, and catmint has a similar smell, very pungent, very unique and distinctive. I was in my garden in early May, feeling pretty bad because this was my first year when I couldn't smell it, and suddenly smelled it. I smelled catmint, and knew that I wasn't making it up, because I couldn't make that up. It's such a unique odor. So, I think it probably, I was probably beginning to heal almost from the moment that I lost my sense of smell, but it just took long. It took a while.
Did you go back to your chair or not?
Did I go, yeah. No, I'll tell you one good thing about having something like this happen is how much you appreciate the little things. Yes. Anybody have a question?
In the back?
Yes.
Okay, sense of smell, sense of satiation,
Yeah.
weight fluctuation.
Yeah.
Are you doing anything with eating disorders or diet or, obesity or
There's a lot of work going on in science. Do you mean me personally?
Yeah.
To help
You
people?
always seem to extrapolate from whatever you experience.
Yeah, yeah. I actually have a daughter who has something called polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is a very mysterious, not as rare as one might think, disease that is an insulin-resistant disorder. And so because of really her, and because she puts weight on very easily, and there are lots of other, I won't go into what all it is, but they're thinking that anything involving diabetes or insulin resistance, there's a connection with the hormones not working right for some of the same reasons that these same hormones are involved. The satiety, that there's something not working right. So I have been continuing to follow the research, and I'm very, very interested in what is being done with our food system with respect to raising awareness that it's very important how we eat, so that we don't trigger these terrible diseases. My father died of diabetes, so I'm very sensitive to that. And it was a nice byproduct of learning about smell to find out, oh, this stuff is all connected.
Ruth, did you have a question?
Yeah, besides your gardening newsletter, what books have you written about gardening?
I wrote a book called, very hokey title, but it's a good book, for Sunset, which is still being sold at a lot of places, like actually Home Depot and places like that. It's called Midwest Top 10, and it's kind of a cool book because it's big and fat, and it has gorgeous pictures of the 10 best plants in 12 different categories for Midwestern gardens. So but not that top 10. Then in addition to the top 10, there are all the hybrids and the cultivars, and so there's thousands and thousands of plants, and there are pictures and descriptions of why they work so well for our climate. And so that's one. I also wrote a history of the Como Conservatory, which is a great place. If you ever get over to St. Paul, any of you, you could just come for the Como Conservatory. Yeah.
I thank you for sharing the photographs of your lovely garden. I'm wondering how your experience with the loss of smell affected your day-to-day life. I mean, it must have been devastating.
It was.
Given your garden intensity.
Yeah.
But how did it affect relationships? How did it affect?
It affects everything. Yeah. I mean, and again, I have to keep saying this, it was the suddenness of it, I think. People who are congenitally anosmic, meaning they're born without smell, they don't get this, what I'm talking about, because they never did. It wasn't a loss, but I mean, if you can't smell, you're used to being able to smell, your husband. And this person has a certain sort of signature smell. Everybody does. And you react to that smell unconsciously in a very positive way. And it's weird that it's gone. It's not until it's gone that you notice it. Obviously, food. I would have to say, since I lost my sense of smell in October, the garden thing was winding down. And so for me, I love to cook, and I love to, to bring the garden into the kitchen in the winter. And I save a lot of things, from the garden. Anyway, food, when you can't smell, not only does it not taste, it doesn't not taste. It still tastes because your taste buds still work. And taste is 90% smell. So, you know, if you can't smell, then everything is off and worse than just neutral. So I kept trying. I mean, you just keep trying to find something palatable. And that was a big loss. You know, and the other thing about losing your sense of smell is that nobody remembers from when, you know, when you see someone, you know, this week, and then you say, oh, by the way, my nose doesn't work anymore. Oh, God, that's awful. Well, then you can count on it, and a week later, they're not going to ask you how you are. Because they don't, I mean, why would they? It doesn't seem like a big deal. You look the same. You're not carrying around a white cane. So one of the really difficult things for me, and I felt like such a baby, was going out to dinner. We have this little gourmet group, and we go to these fancy restaurants. There's 6 of us. And everybody's sitting around talking about, you know, geez, don't you, is that tarragon? What do you think? You know, I had too much. Whoa, too much for me. And I'm like, and they look at me and they'd say, what do you think, Bon?
Hold it up to your nose.
You know, yeah, and you have to be polite, right? You want to go, you know, hey, can you stop that? Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not having a whole lot of fun here. No, but they forget, you know, and so you feel like sorry for yourself. It's like, dang. You know, I mean, not only am I not able to enjoy this, but nobody's feeling sorry for me.
Yes.
Yes.
Question way in the back.
Oh, okay.
Well, when this first happened to you, did your doctor give you hope? Did he say that, don't
No.
worry, one day this will come back?
No, you know, this is interesting. I went to an ENT to finally get diagnosed. First of all, it took forever to find a doctor who knew what the heck was going on. My own internist said that she thought I needed psychiatric help. I mean, I probably would have too, but I mean, you know, I go into her office and I'm saying, Mike, I'm smelling like dead meat. And I mean, she's like, whoa. Here's the name of, you know, my friend over at, you know, the loony bin maybe can help. I mean, so, you know, have you had a lot of stress in your life lately? Another doctor told me that he was convinced that my problem was that I had some sort of a nasal infection. He said, you know, my wife says that sometimes when she gets a cold, she smells things. So, I mean, I thought, okay, I'm going to get a steamer. He said, get a steamer, that'll fix it. I spent literally 10 days like this with the steamer, because I'm sort of obsessive, waiting for it to work. Nothing worked. The ENT knew immediately because of the Zicam. It was all over the news in his world, that Zicam.
A prescription drug?
No, it's over the counter. You can't get this product anymore. It was banned. And there's lawsuits and, you know, it's been a big deal. But I wouldn't buy a Zicam product anyway because I think they're bogus. But anyway, so he knew because, you know, the people in the ENT, they were seeing people like me. He knew right away. He said, first thing he said to me was, have you had a cold lately? Yes. Take anything for it? Literally, that was our interview. Yeah. Was it Zicam? I mean, I'm like, thank you, Lord. I could have kissed it. I said, all I care about is, can you get rid of these horrible smells? You can cut my nose off if you want. Anything. He said, oh, you know, don't be sad. Yes, I can. They'll be gone in a week. I'm going to give you this pill. It's a class 1 antidepressant. We don't know why it works, but it just is like it'll clobber your brain and get it to settle down, and you'll be fine. And sure enough, he was right. It worked. But 20 minutes into our interview, he'd poked my nose with his little prodders and everything, and he told me he was going to check and make sure there wasn't a brain tumor causing this. And then at the very end, as I was leaving and you know, just getting my coat and thinking, thank you, Lord. You know, he's taken away these terrible smells. He said, then, of course, you know, after the smells go away, then that's it. You're not going to smell anything ever again. This was that was the first time I fell down. I was standing up, and this was such a shock that I fell down. And my daughter was next to me, and she held me back up again. I mean, really, it was like, what? What? And then he explained that, as if this was like a very ordinary thing. Like he was just telling me that I, you know, was going to have.
He told you you would never smell it.
Yes, he did. And this is my long-winded answer to your question. He said I would never. He said, you know, sometimes people do get their sense of smell back because of what happened to you. I would say don't get my hopes. Don't get your hopes up. That's the way he put it. Don't get your hopes. So I didn't. I mean, I thought, why am I going to hope? So I didn't hope. And that was why when it did start to come back, I didn't believe it. I kept thinking that I was making up these smells, and it was really just fantastic. Fantastically exciting.
Sure. Pam, did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, that wasn't a question,
Okay.
but I have another one. So after you started regaining your sense of smell, my impulse would be to run out and buy every fragrant thing I could find
Yeah.
that I miss.
Yeah,
Did
that's
you do
exactly
that?
what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my husband was cute. You know, he had been trying to get me to. He just could not accept this because you know so much of our relationship is around food and you know all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so he would every day, literally, he would grab something from the cabinet, something really smelly, cloves, Grey Poupon mustard, onions, and he would just put it under my nose. It was like a challenge. Oh, I know you can smell this. Damn it. You know, and so when I did get my sense of smell back, he and I both love lilacs. It's a big family, all sorts of stuff around lilacs in our family. And there's a grove of lilacs about a block away from our house, which is actually where he grew up. And we went over there and sort of had a little ritual of joyous, you know, putting the, you know, just very crying. Very exciting. Mm-hmm.
Got time probably for one more question, and that is Dr. Hafed.
So you consider yourself, I heard you say that you are an artist. You are an artist for you.
I definitely
You are
consider
painting.
myself a brilliant artist. Yes.
I do not disagree.
One of the
She's-
greatest.
So if I look at
That's right.
At your garden, it's for me kind of an abstract painting. Kind of.
Yeah.
So when Beethoven lost his sense of hearing, he still continued.
Yes, I know. I knew that.
creating.
Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing. And so I wanted you to tell me, how did you continue your work
Yeah.
when you lost that sense of hearing as a painter?
Well, you know what? My sense of smell started coming back as I was starting to get back into the, you know, it was a fortuitous timing thing. So I never had to, but I have to admit that before I lost my sense of smell, I did not garden through my nose. You know, I wasn't into fragrance. I took it for granted. I mean, that's the whole lesson with smell. It isn't obvious. It's under the radar. It isn't until it's gone that I didn't think about the way my plants smelled. I would go to the garden center and buy the prettiest plant. I wasn't sticking my nose up, you know. And so everything changed, and my garden changed after I got my sense of smell back. I became much more, first of all, I became much more like hands off, much more interested in the plants that smelled the best, and they tend to be the species plants, a lot of the self-seeders, and I mean, that's a white gross over generally. But I just I became much more interested, like I said before, in the ways that the plants' smells were attracting and providing nectar for the insects and all that stuff. That changed.
Okay, one more.
It seems as though when I looked at your pictures, you're evolving into more of that edible landscape.
Yes, and I plant lots of edible plants in my garden, like bright light Swiss chard and lots of herbs. And I think edible plants tend to be very pretty.
And how beautifully they just mingle.
Yes,
with
yes.
the
In fact, I had like 400 more slides I could have showed if Colin had let me.
I would love to see.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll come back for
I'm
another
just
show in your garden. We'll meet in your garden in St. Paul. We better stop. Thank you all for coming. Bonnie will stay here, I think,
Sure.
and can answer questions, sign books for you. But Bonnie, thank you for this, opening a door into something so beautiful and that I think most of us probably had never thought about. So
Yes.
thank you for being
Oh, well,
here.
thank you so much for having me. It was really fun. Thank you.